everyone. Welcome to today's show. I am your host, Dr. Roberta Westbrook, and we are here at the Houston SPCA, the Pet Pawcast, and we are just happy to have you with us today. It's summer. We are all looking forward to going outdoors, to hanging out, going on vacation, and hopefully you are able to bring your pets along for you on some of these fun family trips and vacations. And so I'm here today to talk about some of the things that you may want to be aware of when you're taking your pet, particularly around water. So when you're going to the lake, or maybe you're just spending the afternoon in your backyard pool, or maybe you're going to the beach for the weekend, there are sometimes dangers that you may not be aware of related to the water and the beach. And I just want to make you aware of those sometime today and hopefully help you navigate those dangers to keep everybody safe. So think about your questions related to water-related diseases and dangers for your pets. And then in the meantime, I want to introduce you to a wonderful pet that we have available for adoption. Our pet of the week this week is Daphne. Daphne is an adult. She's about a 1 year. Your family well. So, does anybody have any questions about water-related diseases or dangers?
They want to make a trip to Galveston. What precautions can they take before they make the trip?
Absolutely. So you want to have a beach weekend. What fun this can be. So things to consider. Is your pet that you're taking with you used to being at the beach or the water? If this is your first time taking your pet to the beach or the water, there's some things to be aware of. Number one, when you're taking your pet into the water, you may want to do that leashed at first because you're not sure how your pet may respond to the open water. So when you're walking with your pet along the beach, make sure they're on a leash and that you walk them very slowly, maybe toward the edge of the water and the beach intersection. And then gradually you can move further and further into the water. Something that can help your pet get used to the water is treats and toys. So if your pet is food motivated or toy motivated, you can use those items to help entice your animal to come in the water with you and to be comfortable in the water. But it's a good idea to just start slowly, let them get their paws wet, let them get their legs wet, judge whether or not they're comfortable before you move forward. If you find that they're not comfortable in the water, it's okay. Don't force them. There are processes that you can go through to make it much smoother in the future.
So are dogs automatically good swimmers, or is that something we have to teach?
That's a great question. Are dogs automatically good swimmers? If your dog falls into the pool or the lake, for example, instinctively, they do tend to know how to, what we call doggy paddle, and keep themselves above water. But sometimes animals will panic. And if they're not good in the water or not comfortable in the water, they can certainly panic and not be able to find their way out. And that can lead to exhaustion. And in some terrible cases, that can lead to drowning. So you do want to make sure that your pet is comfortable in the water. And if you have a pool in your backyard and you're trying to get your pet comfortable, get in the pool with your pet. Show your pet how to get out. And what I mean by that is if you're in the pool with your pet, swim to the stairs with them and get out with them. Show them how to get out using the stairs, that if they ever fall in on their own, they know how to get out. But instinctively, they do know how to keep themselves above water. If you're in open water, like at Galveston Beach, you can also purchase a life jacket for your pet so that if they get in the water and they start to panic, that can help keep them afloat and it can really help save their life.
And what's a good age that I can introduce my puppy to swimming?
If you want your puppy to begin learning how to swim and be comfortable in the water really early, particularly if they're like a Labrador retriever or they're going to be doing some water work later on in life, then you can probably start around 8 to 10 weeks. That's probably a good age to start. But again, go in the water with them, make it a fun experience. If you have access to, a pool or a source of water that sort of has a graduated entry into the water, so they're not on concrete at one moment and completely in the water the next, having a little gradual entry like a ramp might help them get used to it sooner. But you can also do this at home in your bathtub, just getting them in the water, getting them used to the water, and letting them know that this could be a very fun time.
Are there any breeds that you don't recommend taking them out to swim or have a more watchful eye on?
Well, certainly some brachycephalic breeds may become more exhausted as they're swimming in the water. Remember, we have talked about brachycephalic breeds and their respiratory issues. So any breed that might have difficulty, getting air on a regular basis or are more prone to exhaustion, you may want to be careful about taking them into the water. So I would say if you have a pet that you're concerned about, do it slowly, stay with them, make sure they're comfortable in the water. If at any moment you see that they are in distress, get them out. It's better to be safe than sorry.
And if our dog accidentally drinks salt water at the beach, is there something that we need to look out for, or is that okay for them?
Yes, salt water ingestion. So if your pet is swimming in salt water, it's natural for them to want to either by accident or on purpose want to ingest that water. And too much salt water can be toxic for dogs. So too much sodium can actually cause them to have vomiting, diarrhea, sometimes even neurologic signs like seizures and weakness and trouble walking. So if you are noticing that your pet's drinking a lot of salt water, you may want to give them a break from that salt water, get them out, make sure that they have a meal, make sure that they have some fresh water available to try to dilute out all that salt water. But you certainly don't want them to drink large amounts of salt water. It certainly could be toxic.
And what about chlorinated pool water? The same applies?
Sure. If any kind of pool water that has toxins in it or chemicals in it, you want to make sure that they're not ingesting too much of that. Small amounts are probably not going to be harmful, but if they're continuing to drink pool water, certainly could lead to GI upset. So make sure that they are not doing that.
My dog loves to dig on the sand at the beach. Are there any dangers associated with sand?
That's fun. Digging in the sand on the beach. We're all, playing in the beach, making sand castles. It's a fun time. Dogs love to dig, and bury things in that sand. Something that they can do, though, is that as they're digging in the sand and they're putting their head in the sand, they may ingest a lot of that sand by accident. And so when they get a lot of sand in their GI tract, particularly in their stomach, it gets wet and it starts to solidify and it can sit very heavily on their stomach, at minimum causing stomach upset, but in worst case scenarios, causing an actual obstruction of the GI tract. So don't let them ingest a lot of sand. If you're noticing that they're doing that again, give them a break from the sand, give them some water to drink, and take a break so that they don't injure or harm themselves.
So last year we heard on the news some, devastating effects that dogs can take after they go on a lake at, for example, Austin at Lady Bird. How do we know which lakes are safe for my pet to swim in?
Well, certainly you can go to some lakes that are experiencing bacterial or algae overgrowth. And sometimes when pets are swimming in those lakes, they can ingest that bacteria and or algae and have some pretty serious side effects to that. So you may want to look on a website or the city's website of the area that you're going to. And oftentimes they can give you information about the conditions of the water. They can tell you whether or not there's been toxic substances found in the water. They can give you advice about the tide and really some health tips to keep you safe. So I would say if you're planning that trip, look on the website, see if you can find information about the safety of that water before you go.
And what are some symptoms that we should look out for if we go to a lake that isn't, that safe?
So if you're noticing that your pet has been in a lake and maybe you didn't know that there was bacteria or algae overgrowth there. So you're swimming in the lake, your pet's been in that lake. You could notice that in the days afterward that they start to feel sick, right? So you may notice vomiting, diarrhea. You may notice also, again, some neurologic signs that can occur. So seizures or difficulty breathing, these things, if you're noticing anything abnormal in your pet after going to a lake or swimming, in a lake or even in your backyard, these are signs that they could be having some dangers related to water ingestion, and have them see your family veterinarian right away. A lot of the signs of salt toxicity and algae toxicity and even just drinking chemicals from the water can all look the same. And so you won't know exactly what's happening unless you have your pet examined by a veterinarian. So this means if you're noticing anything, lethargy, not eating, vomiting, diarrhea, seizures, weakness, anything related to a recent water trip, then this would be a sign to take your pet in, have them examined by a veterinarian so that we can catch things sooner rather than later.
Someone has heard the term dry drowning. What does that mean?
So dry drowning can mean that, if your pet has been in the water and they maybe had a near drowning episode where, they seem to be overcome by the water. Maybe they ingested a lot of water, but they seem to do better. And then days later, or even hours later, they started to seem like they are having difficulty breathing or choking or struggling later on. This could still be related to that water accident. So even though it's not in the moment and they're not drowning in the moment, sometimes this can happen hours or days later, where their airway can become inflamed, can spasm, and they can start to have difficulty breathing later as a result of a previous water accident. If you notice something like this, again, get your pet to your family veterinarian right away, because they will be able to help you distinguish between what's happening and how to treat it.
So if we do see drowning, on site, are we able to perform CPR on a dog? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a hard one. If you know what to do, that's great. If you're not sure what to do, try to get to a veterinary hospital as soon as possible. People can perform CPR on their pet. Even if you're by yourself, you can certainly do that. If you have two people, you can do that. And we can make that one of our shows where we do a demonstration. But essentially what you want to do is lay your pet on his or her side. And it can be either side. Oftentimes we try to lay them on the right side. So lay them on their right side. And then what you want to do is, just like you would do in human CPRs, you want to put one hand over the other, and you're going to put your hands on your pet's chest, usually at the widest part of the chest, where it seems to be the widest. And you're going to do chest compressions. And you want to compress the chest enough that you're going to be able to pump blood manually from the heart to the rest of the body. And that will help blood and oxygen circulate through your pet's body. If you're by yourself, then you want to do about 2 breaths every 30 compressions. So that means if your pet is laying on his or her side and you have your hands one on top of the other at the widest part of your pet's chest, and you're pressing down doing chest compressions, every 30 compressions, stop, pause, and then you want to give 2 breaths. So you may be wondering, how do I give a breath to my pet? Because they don't have the same shape of the mouth and they have the nose, and what do you do? So one of the things that you want to do to give a breath for your pet is close their mouth and cup the mouth. So if they have a long muzzle, you can use both hands to close the mouth, and then you can use your mouth and put it over their nose. So you want to put your mouth over your pet's nose. You're holding their muzzle closed and you're breathing into their nose, and that's a way that you can get oxygen in. So you may have to do 2 hands with a large dog. If you have a small dog or a cat, you may be able to do that with just 1 hand, or you may be able to put your mouth over their nose and mouth at the same time. So that's 30 compressions for 2 breaths. And then periodically stop and look for whether or not your pet begins to breathe on their own again. You can also check for a pulse in your pet. And ways to do that is to take your hand and put it on the left side of your pet's chest, which if they're already laying on their right side, their left side is going to be the side that's up. You can put your hand on the chest and see if you can palpate a heartbeat. You can also try to palpate a heartbeat very similarly to where we would check one in people. It's a little bit more difficult there, but you want to see if there's any sign that your pet has a spontaneous return to either breathing or cardiac contractions. So this is something that you certainly can do. If you have someone that is doing CPR with you, you can continue to do the compressions, and they can continue to give one breath about every 15 or 20 seconds. The third thing I want to say about that is how fast you give those compressions. And so you want to give those compressions at about 120 beats a minute. And, you know, you probably heard the song Staying Alive. That's a really good song that you can sing to help you meet that rate. So staying alive, staying alive, staying alive, staying alive. So if you don't know that song, Google it, get it on YouTube, and have that song in your mind so that you can help keep your pets alive. And maybe we can give a demonstration for you in our upcoming shows.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Westbrook. And we know with trying to go tubing in Texas, the water can be super freezing for us. Do dogs react the same to water? I mean, even though it's hot and it's summer, could they get hypothermia from that?
It's possible that your pet can experience hypothermia. You know, if it's really sunny out and the water is a pretty good temperature, then your pet may not be likely to experience hypothermia. But if you're feeling extra cold and you're feeling like this could be a really cold environment for your pet, pay attention to that. So you may notice again them shivering. So cold will trigger a shiver because your pet may be trying to generate body heat. And so if you're noticing that they're shivering, or you're noticing that they're beginning to lose color, instead of becoming nice and pink, they're starting to become pale or becoming slower or lethargic, this could be signs that they're suffering from hypothermia, and you may want to get them out of that water and get them in the boat with you as soon as possible.
Is there anything we need to do after we go swimming to make sure that they remain safe?
Yes, after you swim, you're going to the lake or even in the pool, it's a really good idea, just like we would do, is just to get their body clean, right? So you don't want all of the contaminants that were potentially in the pool or the lake to sit on their body, on their skin, maybe even in their ears. You want to rinse all of that off. So oftentimes lakes will have kind of a freshwater rinse after going into the lake. And so you can wash your pet off. You can give them a bath, dry out their ears, take a cotton ball, kind of like we have here, or a towel, and dry out their ears. You don't want to have your pets have continuously moist or wet ears, because that can make them prone to ear infections later. So I would say once you get out of the pool or out of the lake, give your pet a nice rinse off, a nice bath, dry out their ears, and they'll be nice and happy and rest well the rest of the day.
So if my dog does end up developing an ear infection, what are the kind of signs for that? And is there anything that we can do at home to treat that ear infection?
If your pet winds up getting what you think is an ear infection, you may notice that by a couple of signs. One sign is they may paw at their ear. They may seem really bothered by it. So pawing at the ear, shaking the head, or having what we call a head tilt, where they just hold their head to one side or the other. It could indicate that whichever side they're holding their head toward is the side that has the affected ear. So if they're holding their head to the right a lot, it could be that ear is the one that's bothering them, and it could be developing an ear infection. If they're sensitive to touch as well, so if you go to touch the ear or lift up the flap of the ear and they're sensitive to that, that could be a sign of an ear infection. And then once you do that, if you look inside, you could see redness. You could sometimes see discharge that might be really brown or green or yellow. And so those would be signs that perhaps your pet has an ear infection. Ear infections can be treated relatively easily, but they do require a visit to your veterinarian, because your veterinarian is going to examine those ears really well, make sure we identify what the bacteria or fungus is so that we can prescribe the right medication. But also we're going to use an otoscope, an instrument to help us look deep inside your pet's ears and make sure that their eardrum is still intact, because we want to make sure that tympanic membrane, that eardrum, is still intact, because that can kind of give us an idea about your pet's hearing in the future.
Perfect. Are there any breeds that are prone to ear infection, or does the same for all dogs that go swimming?
Yes, so certainly swimming and water buildup in the ears is a predisposing factor, but there's some animals that are just naturally more predisposed to ear infections, and those tend to be animals with a conformation to the ears that doesn't allow proper air flow through the ears, and that can trap moisture and debris. Examples would be animals with long floppy ears like Cocker Spaniels or Basset Hounds, but also Labrador Retrievers and Golden Retrievers can have recurrent ear infections, and animals with what we call stenotic ear canals. Stenotic ear canals are ear canals that are very, very narrow, much like a Shar-Pei might have. Those ear canals are very narrow and they trap dirt and debris, and sometimes they are prone to ear infections as well.
And then on the subject of being outside and enjoying the outdoors, are there any environmental allergens that my dogs can be exposed to?
Absolutely. Spring and summer are really seasons that, as beautiful as they are, can promote allergic reactions in dogs that already have environmental allergies. So as the grasses grow and the flowers are blooming, sometimes those pollens can actually cause flare-ups in our pets' skin allergens. So if you're spending a lot more time outdoors, then you might notice that your pet that has allergies to things in the environment might become more itchy. They may lick their paws more. They may rub their face on the carpet, or they may scoop their rear end on the carpet more often. These might be signs that they are reacting to environmental allergens. Definitely have them examined by your family veterinarian to confirm that that's what it is, and they can give you proper medication to help keep them more calm and comfortable during these hot months.
Perfect. And then as the temperature is rising, is there any way that we can report if there's any dogs that we see are in danger of heat stroke or things like that from neighbors or just strays?
This is very important. Every year we find animals that are suffering unnecessarily from heat stroke and heat exhaustion, and even losing their lives to this. It's completely preventable. And all it takes is for someone to recognize that an animal is exposed to direct sunlight, doesn't have access to shade, doesn't have water, and do something about that. So if you see a pet that's outdoors in direct sunlight and they don't have access to shade or they don't have water, please call. You can call the Houston SPCA. We can send someone out to check on those animals and make sure that they are doing well. But if you can, try to get those animals out of that direct sunlight. If you're able to, get those animals into some shade, get them some fresh water, get them some air conditioning, and just 10 or 15 minutes of this can actually really help to save their lives and prevent them from going into heat stroke. So all it takes is just a few minutes of fresh, cool air, some fresh water, and getting them out of that direct sunlight. You can help us save lives.
And if we want to make a report, who can we call?
So if you want to make a report, please call 713-869-7722. Call the Houston SPCA. We have our cruelty investigations team. We also have our 24-hour rescue ambulance. And this is a wonderful team of individuals whose purpose it is to go out and help to save animals' lives. Those who are, abandoned, those who are being treated cruelly, and those through no fault of their own may be suffering severe injuries and or illness. So if you have any questions, please give us a call. If you see animals that need help immediately, please call that number and we'll send someone out right away to get them help. Well, we thank you again for joining us at the Pet Pawcast here today. Please, again, come on down to our adoption center and meet all of our dogs. They are doing wonderful. They're learning wonderful things with our volunteers and our adoptions manager, Alexi. So thank you, Alexi, and the whole team for getting our dogs in great condition and ready for their forever homes. So come on down and visit us. We're happy to see you. No appointment necessary. And we will see you next week for more helpful tips to keep your pets healthy and happy. I'm your host, Roberta Westbrook. We'll see you next week.